Newspapers generally try to keep themselves out of the news. They don't weigh in to defend their own reporters, for example, unless something very serious has happened. You see it when a correspondent is being detained by soldiers at the Tibetan border, for instance, or when someone's been kidnapped by ISIS in Syria. But you generally don't see it in response to criticism from a cable news show. But today, the New York Times made an exception to that rule and jumped ferociously to the defense of its social media reporter, Taylor Lorenz.
Taylor Lorenz is arguably the worst journalist on the internet. From her bringing up old tweets people have made in the past to slandering people she doesn't like behind their backs. Before we continue any further, we need some context on who Taylor Lorenz is. Taylor Lorenz is a journalist who has worked for The Atlantic and BuzzFeed. She currently writes for the New York Times. During this time, she has managed to start up many controversies involving her slandering popular YouTubers and starting a controversy with Tucker Carlson for her poor behavior. But before we continue any further, it would be appreciated if you subscribe for more video essays like this.
Okay, Taylor Lorenz of the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen. She is a style reporter.
Before heading further, all throughout the rest of the video, I will be featuring a creator who goes by the name Cornback Lass of Meredocity. There is a massive glaring issue with Taylor Lorenz. She cannot handle criticism. This is evident on her Twitter page. No matter how irrelevant you are, she will block you if you criticize her. I have proof of this from experience, which is just funny. This here isn't the only place of evidence. On Taylor Lorenz's Twitter page, she announced that she was making a Discord server that was invite only. The tweet read,
I was talking to a bunch of creators tonight about Discord. Would you guys want to join if I made a server? I still have to be on here, unfortunately. It's where I get all my stories and sources. But I would love to have my followers be more of a community. Let me know.
She created a poll underneath and said,
if you're interested in joining my potential Discord server, please drop your info into this forum. I'm going to start it invite only if I do make one.
The form was a blatant privacy violation requiring the user's full name, email, and link to Twitter or Instagram. Clearly, she tries her hardest to shield herself from all forms of criticism, and if you think this is bad, it gets worse. In August of 2020, Taylor Lorenz made an article which caused a defamation lawsuit worth $6.2 million. The New York Post made an article on the event titled,
New York Times reporter Taylor Lorenz sued for defamation by TikTok agent. TikTok agent Ariadna Jacob, who represents stars like Charli D'Amelio and other online influencers, has slapped the New York Times and its reporter Taylor Lorenz with the $6.2 million defamation lawsuit. Filed in the U.S. Southern District of New York, the lawsuit claims that an August 2020 article by Lorenz contained, quote, numerous false and disparaging statements, end quote, about Jacob and her businesses, including an accusation that she leaked nude images of one of her clients to, quote, manipulate him. A rep for the New York Times said, Ms. Jacobs' main complaint is that the New York Times gave voice to young people who felt they had been mistreated by her. It's troubling that she has turned to litigation to try to silence those who criticize her business practices. We plan to defend against the suit vigorously. Lorenz did not return requests for comment. Jacob started leasing out spaces in the mansions of Los Angeles to some of her clients, giving them a place to crash while they created viral videos. Lorenz's story claimed that Jacob jacked up the rent on tenants who lived in her influencer house, the kids next door, and exposed the agent's alleged business practices and relationships with influencers, claiming that they were harassed over covering rent, not getting paid for their work, and getting pressured to produce content daily. Known as the TikTok agent for influencer marketing, Jacob is CEO of Influences, a company she started in 2018 that managed as many as 85 TikTok stars and worked with brands including MasterCard and Universal Group. Her TikTok influencers included Brittany Tomlinson, Addison Easterling, and Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio. Some of those clients have tens of millions of followers on the platform, and 5 of them have been included on Forbes' highest earning TikTok creators list. Marcus Olin, a member of Kids Next Door who lived in the house leased by Jacob, told The Times that he and his fellow creators feared getting sued by Jacob if they did not adhere to the content creation quotas that Jacob had mandated. Quote, "We were expecting a quota where we could pay our half of rent through brand deals, but we weren't getting enough deals to cover our half of rent," Olin told The Times, adding that he had unsuccessfully tried to be released from his contract. Quote, "Anytime talent wants to leave, she goes straight to suing them," he said in an interview. Another creator, Tomlinson, known on social as Brittany Broski, filed a state labor complaint earlier this week, saying that Jacob held more than $23,000 from her. Tomlinson told Lorenz that Jacob tries to lock creators into her contracts. Her complaint also claimed that Jacob demanded up to 20% in commission. Jacob denied all of the claims about her in Lorenz's article. In the lawsuit, Jacob said that after the article was published, she lost all 85 of her TikTok clients and the money that was tied to her contract. She claims she spent tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees. Jacob said that since Lorenz's article ran, she has been fired by all of her clients and that she has had difficulty approaching new talent and that major brands stopped doing business with her firm. Jacob told entertainment trade publication The Wrap, which first broke the news of the lawsuit, that she hasn't recovered any money that she claims her clients owe her. "After the New York Times article, I was radioactive in my industry," Jacob told The Wrap. "People believed Taylor lies I stole from clients, leaked revenge porn, filmed young people without consent, and pretended to be friends with social media god Gary Vaynerchuk, someone who's actually been a close friend and advocate of mine for over 10 years. I spent every last penny," Jacob said. "It was overnight. I went from all these people I invested in for months and much longer, and now being told they should not work with me in Hollywood." Court papers also detailed how Jacob sought out mental health treatment and experienced suicidal thoughts following the article's publication. She also left California and relocated to Las Vegas in order to seek new careers and business adventures, the suit said.
This is not a good look for Lorenz in any way. Being sued for defamation as a journalist destroys her credibility, and the fact that the company is defending her doesn't surprise me in any way. 2 videos I made a while back, both on the New York Times, exposed this poor behavior. The first one was titled "Kamala and Joe Get Person of the Year for 2020, and the second one was titled "Dirt on the NY Times." In the first video, I announced that Joe Biden and Kamala got the Person of the Year award for 2020, and that was unfair because there can only be one Person of the Year, and many people would disagree with them getting that award. The second video I made quickly afterwards brought up their shady past of who they picked for Person of the Year in previous years, including Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler, which makes no sense at all. I cannot understand how one company can be this garbage with who they hire and who they defend. One thing that Taylor Lorenz loves to do is slander people, just to further her career as a journalist. According to an article by the Fox News, the allegation is that Lorenz leveled a false charge against Mac Andreessen, New York Times Taylor Lorenz blasted for false claim tech entrepreneur used arsehole on social media app. New York Times tech and internet culture reporter Taylor Lorenz is facing intense backlash for leveling a false charge against business tech entrepreneur Mark Andreessen. Late Saturday, Lorenz alleged on Twitter that the Silicon Valley investor used what she called the R slur during a conversation on the audio-driven social media app Clubhouse about Redditors' recent splash on Wall Street that prompted the surge of GameStop's stock price. Mark Andreessen just used openly using the R slur on Clubhouse tonight, and not one other person in the room called him on it or saying anything. Lorenz tweeted. Andreessen's colleague Nathan Jones, who was moderating the chat room in question, corrected Lorenz, explaining that another user, Felicia Horowitz, spoke about Redditors referring to themselves as R-word revolution, but that Andreessen himself never used that word ever. This is why people block because of this horse shit dishonesty, Jones tweeted. Lorenz then deleted the tweet, replying to Jones, "Thanks for clarifying that it was Felicia saying that word rather than Mark, as many in the room heard it. I hope you can understand how some people in the room felt hearing it." Lorenz was widely criticized on social media for her error. Taylor is another petty professional tattletale masquerading as a journalist. Clubhouse participant Camille Foster of the Fifth Column posted reacted, "Her reports should be regarded with the highest degree of skepticism. Is New York Times determined to geyser all semblance of respectability? Besides the fact that a New York Times reporter recklessly tried to destroy someone's reputation, what is wrong with this episode? Everything," the journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote on Substack. Lorenz herself has been obsessed with monitoring Clubhouse discussions in general, and Andreessen in particular for months, mocking him just last week when she obtained a fake credential to enter. Just take a second to ponder how infantile and despotic in equal parts of all this is. This New York Times reporter used her platform to virtually jump out of her desk to run to the teacher and exclaim, "He used the R word." This is what she tried for months to accomplish, to catch people in private communications using words that are prohibited or ideas that are banned, to tell on them to the public. That she got all wrong is arguably the least humiliating and pathetic aspect of all this, Greenwald said. Fellow Substack writer Matt Taibbi agreed with Greenwald, calling Lorenz a dunce of historic proportions unleashed on the world by the New York Times. Journalist Adam Pennenberg pulled up the Times' ethical journalism standards, suggesting Lorenz may have violated her paper's policies, pointing to its pursuing the news section. Staff members should disclose their identity to people they cover, whether face-to-face or otherwise, though they need not always announce their status as journalists. When seeking information normally available to the public, the Times policy states, "Theatre, music and art critics and other writers who review goods or services offered to the public may conceal their Times connection but may not normally assert a false identity or affiliation." Lorenz set her Twitter account to private amid the backlash. The Times did not immediately respond to Fox News' request for comment. All the backlash that Lorenz got was well deserved. Monitoring someone so when they say one wrong word or think the wrong way, she can make an article on them and get her entire audience to attack them, even though Mark Andreessen never said the R slur, and she doesn't even follow the ethical journalism standards, which is a major red flag, and once again brings up the question of why Taylor Lorenz still has a job at the New York Times. Fox News managed to report on the situation. Here's a segment from them.
Well, Taylor Lorenz works at the New York Times, defending the interests of the ruling class by force. She defames people. One person is fighting back, however. Her name is Aradna Jacob. She's recently filed a $6 million defamation suit against Taylor Lorenz. Ariadna Jacob is an entrepreneur and influencer marketing expert, founder of influences.com. She joins us to explain her lawsuit. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. So Taylor Lorenz stalks the landscape hurting people, and if you say something about it, she claims you're attacking her because she's got all kinds of neuroses or whatever. You're the aggressor. You're the only person I've seen fight back. Tell us why you're doing this and what your claim against her is.
On to our next section, International Women's Day and Fox News controversy. We can't forget Taylor Lorenz's largest controversy with Tucker Carlson. On the 9th of March 2021, Taylor Lorenz tweeted, "For International Women's Day, please consider supporting women during online harassment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the harassment and smear campaign I've had to endure over the past year has destroyed my life. No one should ever have to go through this." Basically, she's victimizing herself, Tucker says. She's referring to the people making fun of her in the comments, which sounds like a typical thing that she would complain about, and even disagreeing with her, which is pathetic. Let's check out the video from Fox News.
Newspapers generally try to keep themselves out of the news. They don't weigh in to defend their own reporters, for example, unless something very serious has happened. You see it when a correspondent is being detained by soldiers at the Tibetan border, for instance, or when someone's been kidnapped by ISIS in Syria. But you generally don't see it in response to criticism from a cable news show. But today, the New York Times made an exception to that rule and jumped ferociously to the defense of its social media reporter, Taylor Lorenz.
She must have some good opinions if the New York Times is still going to defend her. From slandering in her articles to all-out illegal battle, which still involves slander. So it doesn't make any sense at all that she still has a position when she's able to do all of this. She is able to slander other people and even start up a controversy with Fox News, which is completely reckless. Even though many people disagree with Tucker Carlson, he is in the right in this situation.
Now, we told you about Taylor Lorenz last night in a segment about how the most privileged in our society now consider themselves oppressed. And Taylor Lorenz is certainly a shining example of that principle. A New York Times reporter from Greenwich telling you what a victim she is. Earlier this week, Lorenz sent a tweet asking America to celebrate International Women's Day by supporting her specifically, as she faces what she describes as a year-long campaign of harassment. That harassment, Lorenz wrote, has, quote, destroyed my life. Now, normally we'd be deeply sympathetic to this. Harassment is awful. Harassment is a crime, and it should be a crime. If a mob of screaming lunatics showed up at Taylor Lorenz's house and threatened her, we would condemn that mob immediately, no matter what political position they claim to represent. But that's not even close to what Taylor Lorenz is talking about. According to Taylor Lorenz, saying mean things about her on Twitter is, quote, harassment. Disagreeing with her on the internet at all is, quote, harassment. Failing to affirm her as she self-actualizes and attempts to realize her hopes and dreams in this world is, quote, harassment, and so on.
This guy is just tearing through Taylor Lorenz. You know what the New York Times should do? They should hire Tucker Carlson instead and just fire Taylor Lorenz. The benefits to hiring him are he doesn't get the company sued, he doesn't start random controversies with other news channels and journalists. Well, that last line would be true if the Young Turks didn't get involved. Fun fact, Hassan Piker used to work for the Young Turks, so you know it's gonna get extreme.
There's a lot of real harassment out there. This is not it. So you can see why we included Lorenz in a script about the most privileged in our society pretending to be the most oppressed in our society. We were embarrassed for Taylor Lorenz. She spends her entire life on the internet, so of course, after a while, you become a deeply unhappy narcissist. That's what the internet does to people. And we assumed her bosses would be embarrassed for her too. Little did we know that they are all exactly just like she is. Well, of course they are, and that's the problem. The people who run the New York Times believe that anyone who disagrees with them is committing assault. Here is their official statement on our segment. In a now familiar move, Tucker Carlson opened his show last night by attacking a journalist. Oh, a journalist! The one protected group left in America. Journalists make their living trying to destroy your life, but if you say a single word about it, you're a criminal, a moral monster. You must be stopped.
The video is not even over and it's getting wild. It all adds up now. The New York Times can't even be bothered to hire decent journalists. Also, I have one big gripe about the New York Times. They force you to pay for their articles, which defeats the purpose of my ad blocker stopping them from getting money. For your own good, just don't pay for their services.
The statement goes on, and keep in mind as we read this, we're not making any of it up. Criticizing Taylor Lorenz was, quote, a calculated and cruel tactic which Carlson regularly deploys to unleash a wave of harassment and vitriol at his intended target. It's all pretty amusing when you think about it. Reading a tweet on television, that's fine when it was written by, say, Donald Trump. It's called reporting. But when that tweet was written by a New York Times reporter, reading it out loud is a, quote, calculated and cruel tactic. But calculated to do what exactly? Presumably calculated to get more people to disagree with Taylor Lorenz, which was, they've already established, is harassment.
It's funny how the only thing that the New York Times know how to do is lie. In the next part, Tucker Carlson brings up how he was doxxed by the New York Times just so they could shut him up because they didn't agree with him.
Unbelievable. A woman in New York, shopkeeper, standing outside a shop. Look at that. Looters. Try to confront looters, bashing women now. Okay? What on earth has that got to do with George Floyd?
While the burning and looting has shocked the nation, it's also divided those on the front lines of the protests.
Antifa is the violent anti-capitalist group that attacked me in the street, by the way, a couple of years ago. In the United States, in Portland, Antifa also attacked another conservative photojournalist, Andy No, leaving him bleeding, and they attacked an elderly man in the same city, and now they're being blamed for some of the violence in these race riots.
Many see this as opportunistic looting, taking advantage of a stretched police force and nothing to do with the actual protest.
We will now look at a cowardly thing the New York Times has done. To get an insight on the mindset of the New York Times, the involvement of Antifa all began when the New York Times doxed Tucker Carlson. This makes Taylor Lorenz look like nothing, and the journalist responsible for the doxing of Tucker Carlson is Murray Carpenter, which, according to the Washington Post, wrote an article titled Tucker Carlson claimed the New York Times plans to expose his address, then his fans doxed the reporter. The first part of the title is a lie because by the time the article was released, he was already doxed, and tweets in the article claimed that Tucker Carlson was never doxed, according to Don Moynihan, in quotes. Obviously, the New York Times is not in the habit of doxing the subject of its stories. So, what's going on here? Tucker was signaling to his followers to harass New York Times reporters who are covering him and any other reporters who might be thinking of doing so. This quote single-handedly destroyed the article's credibility, but she did provide evidence for Murray Carpenter's doxing. I don't condone doxing, but when you have already doxed someone, you deserve it to happen back to you. So you can see the article was made in bad faith. You may be wondering what this all has to do with Antifa. Well, it's quite simple. After the doxing of Tucker Carlson, Antifa found out and harassed his family and forced them to move out of their home. Let's jump back to watching the rest of the video that Fox News released.
It's a pretty good little scam the New York Times has going. They get to hurt you at will, but you're not allowed to notice. Notice what they're doing, and you are calculated and cruel. We know this because we experienced it this summer. The Times tried to send a reporter to my house just to make absolutely certain that everyone knows where my kids live. I called the paper and told them to back off. There's no news value in where my house is. It's not even a big house. The whole thing was bizarre and creepy as hell, but they ignored the request. The paper only stopped the story when we shamed them on this show. To be clear, we would never even consider running a series on where New York Times editors live. Obviously, that's disgusting. What country is this? But they tried to do it. The best part, though, is what happened after. The Washington Post jumped in naturally with a piece claiming that this show had incited dangerous harassment by asking the New York Times not to write a story about where my house is. We are, quote, endangering reporters. The very same reporters who are trying to write a piece about my house. It was all so passive-aggressive and crazy that we were happy when the whole thing ended. But then just today, the official New York Times Twitter account sent out that same Washington Post story. The New York Times described it as a, quote, anatomy of an attack by Carlson that had real-world consequences. It was pure insanity. But that's still not the most amazing part of the Taylor Lorenz story. The greatest irony of all is what Taylor Lorenz herself does for a living. According to the New York Times statement today, quote, Taylor Lorenz is a talented New York Times journalist doing timely and essential reporting. Timely and essential, okay. Thanks for the adjectives, but what kind of reporting is it exactly? What does Taylor Lorenz do all day? We could answer that question at some length.
That was the best ending I've seen to a video in a while. It really surprises me with how many things the New York Times can get away with while being defended by the Washington Post. Fox News had posted a video before this about the New York Times doxing Tucker on the 21st of July 2020.
One more thing before we go tonight. Since this show began almost 4 years ago, I've really tried not to talk about myself on the air or even use the first person pronoun. The last thing this country needs is more narcissism. It's not very interesting anyway. People who use the word I a lot tend to bore everyone but themselves.
Just like he started off his video on Taylor Lorenz, he mentions how a journalist/news reporter should not make themselves the main attention of a story. I call this foreshadowing. Both times he mentions not making the journalist/news reporter the main source of attention, yet the New York Times kept forcing that to occur with their series of blunders. First it was doxing, then it was a journalist complaining about everyone making fun of her.
But tonight we're going to make an exception to that rule. We don't have much choice. Last week, the New York Times began working on a story about where my family and I live. As a matter of journalism, there is no conceivable justification for a story like that. The paper is not alleging we've done anything wrong, and we haven't. We pay our taxes, we like our neighbors, we've never had a dispute with anyone. So why is the New York Times doing a story on the location of my family's house? Well, you know why. To hurt us. To injure my wife and kids so that I will shut up and stop disagreeing with them. They believe in force. We've learned that. 2 years ago, a left-wing journalist publicized our home address in Washington. A group of screaming Antifa lunatics showed up while I was at work. They vandalized our home. They threatened my wife. She called 911 while hiding in a closet. A few weeks later, they showed up again at our house. For the next year, they sent letters to our home threatening to kill us. We tried to ignore it. It felt cowardly to sell our home and leave. We'd raised our kids there in the neighborhood, and we loved it. But in the end, that's what we did. We have 4 children, it just wasn't worth it. But the New York Times followed us. The paper has assigned a political activist called Murray Carpenter to write a story about where we are now. They've hired a photographer called Tristan Spinsky to take pictures. Their story about where we live is slated to run in the paper this week. Editors there know exactly what will happen to my family when it does run. I called them today and I told them, but they didn't care. They hate my politics. They want this show off the air. If one of my children gets hurt because of a story they wrote, they won't consider it collateral damage. They know it's the whole point of the exercise, to inflict pain on our family, to terrorize us, to control what we say. That's the kind of people they are. They'll deny this, of course. They'll claim it's just journalism, just the facts. Really? So how would Murray Carpenter and his photographer Tristan Spinsky feel if we told you where they live, if we put pictures of their homes on the air? What if we publicized the home address of every one of the soulless robot editors at the New York Times who assigned and managed this incitement to violence against my family? What about the media editor, Jim Windolf? We could do that. We know who they are. Would that qualify as journalism? We doubt they'd consider it journalism. They'd call it criminal behavior if we did it. And that tells you everything.
Hold the phone. They were planning to do this a second time. A second time. How is this company redeemable? This is completely illegal and no one got arrested. This segment will be completed further on in the video. It is clear that the New York Times is digging their own grave and no one is willing to do anything about it. But after this next section, you will be questioning the reliability of other media companies.
Tucker Carlson had one of his typical temper tantrums after New York Times culture reporter and tech reporter Taylor Lorenz tweeted about women enduring harassment on International Women's Day. Now, her tweet said this, and it seems pretty uncontroversial if you ask me. For International Women's Day, please consider supporting women enduring online harassment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the harassment and smear campaign I've had to endure over the past year has destroyed my life. No one should have to go through this. Now, pay close attention to that timeline there because she references something, and I wanted to learn more about what she's referencing. And I'm gonna give you all the details on that in just a moment. But before I do, here's Tucker Carlson losing it.
The video Tucker had made on Taylor Lorenz proved his point further. When the Young Turks, a media company that Hassan Piker used to work for, found out about what Tucker had said about Lorenz, keep in mind that the Young Turks already made multiple videos on Tucker Carlson, and most of the videos they made on him were for petty reasons. The argument defending Lorenz wasn't the best. Let's have a look at it.
Tucker Carlson had one of his typical temper tantrums after New York Times culture reporter and tech reporter Taylor Lorenz tweeted about women enduring harassment on International Women's Day. Now, her tweet said this, and it seems pretty uncontroversial if you ask me.
We are not even that far through the video, and there is already one big glaring problem. The caption on the video says, Tucker Carlson is bad and also the worst. Laugh my ass off. This is ironic coming from them. They made an entire video attacking Carlson for his own subtitle. What were they thinking? Who did they hire to type this? This is pathetic and sad. They are straight up being biased, which is a big no-no of journalism. This straight out destroys their credibility and makes them be questioning why there are more likes than dislikes on this. Are their audience that blind that they enjoy garbage like this?
For International Women's Day, please consider supporting women enduring online harassment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the harassment and smear campaign I've had to endure over the past year has destroyed my life. No one should have to go through this. Now, pay close attention to that timeline there because she references something, and I wanted to learn more about what she's referencing. And I'm gonna give you all the details on that in just a moment. But before I do, here's Tucker Carlson losing it.
The most powerful people claiming to be powerless. Taylor Lorenz, for example, writes for the New York Times. She's at the very top of journalism's repulsive little food chain. Lorenz is far younger than prominent New York Times reporters used to be. She's also much less talented. You'd think Taylor Lorenz would be grateful for the remarkable good luck that she's had, but no, she's not. Just this morning, she tweeted this, quote, for International Women's Day, please consider supporting women enduring online harassment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the harassment and smear campaign I've had to endure over the past year has destroyed my life. Destroyed her life, really? By most people's standards, Taylor Lorenz would seem to have a pretty good life, one of the best lives in the country, in fact. Lots of people are suffering right now, but no one's suffering quite as much as Taylor Lorenz is suffering. People have criticized her opinions on the internet, and it destroyed her life. Let's pause on this International Women's Day and recognize that. You thought female Uyghurs had it bad. You haven't talked to Taylor Lorenz.
Yep, she
Taylor
made all of
Lorenz
those claims.
She didn't make.
She said that
she
didn't
say that she's suffering more than anyone else. She none of that. She's just making a point about how harassment has impacted her and how, hey, maybe consider supporting women who have gone through similar things. It shouldn't be a difficult, controversial thing to digest. But of course, for people like Tucker Carlson, who was handed his wealth on a silver platter as like.
Tucker Carlson now is rich, but he wasn't exactly given everything on a silver platter, even though he was upper middle class. Also, they don't exactly say that Tucker is wealthier than Taylor. They only hint at it, even though he is wealthier than her. And I like how they think they can defend Taylor Lorenz, who is wealthier than most people, who only makes herself the center of attention on International Women's Day just because no intelligent person agrees with her. Also, back to the wealth argument. Anna Kasparian, the annoying human who is complaining right now, has a net worth of $2 million, so she can't make the wealth argument.
A Swanson heir, he has thoughts. Okay, this guy has thoughts on how powerful other people are, how talented other people are. I mean, homeboy can't have a single interview without looking as if he's the most confused person on the planet, okay? All he does is spread propaganda and ridiculous, pro-corporate, by the way, talking points, which is part of the story, and I'll get to that in a minute. But John.
Damn, Tucker has opinions? What's next? He has rights? And you say he looks confused when you look like you snorted a ton of coke before you recorded the response. And you said he has pro-corporate views. Okay, provide some evidence.
Why don't you go off before I go off more?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna say that I'm going to track down wherever that particular B-roll file is being stored, and I'm gonna delete it. And I'm gonna track down every copy that's ever been made. I'm gonna delete it because I don't want to see that anymore. But anyway, you rightly pointed out that of course he's 100 times wealthier than her, 500 times wealthier than her. But she's the luckiest. He hasn't been lucky. He wasn't just lucky to be born into a family that could provide him with everything he'd ever want. She's the lucky one. There's probably very few people watching this that watch Tucker Carlson because they like him. But if there's literally any of you there, were the things that he's saying actually reflective of anything she had said from the beginning of? Did she claim that she has it worse than the Uyghurs? Did she do that? Did she say that she has it worse than literally everyone? If Tucker Carlson is one of this.
Hold on. Sorry, you mentioned the Uyghurs. Does anyone actually think that Tucker Carlson cares about the persecution of Muslims in China? You guys really think, does anyone actually buy that? Like, doesn't anyone get disgusted with the fact that these goons use humans as props for their little political talking points?
Taylor Lorenz has a net worth of $2 million according to Apoom.com. And Tucker Carlson's net worth is $30 million, not even close to 100 times her wealth. And Taylor never specifically said she had it worse than the Uyghurs, however they said it. But she acts like she does. I'm assuming Tucker meant it that way, and then Anna goes on to claiming that Tucker does not care about the persecution of Muslims in China. Is she really this dumb? Then she claims that Tucker is only using them as props for political reasons. Clearly, the Young Turks will make up anything to prove their point, and I find it's a waste of time to go through this video from the amount of mistakes they already made, but the video is already long enough. There was also a response from the damage report, hosted by the soy boy you saw on the Young Turks.
A couple days ago, reporter Taylor Lorenz decided for International Women's Day, she was going to make what seemed to a rational person like a pretty reasonable request. She tweeted, "For International Women's Day, please consider supporting women enduring online harassment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the harassment and smear campaign I've had to endure over the past year has destroyed my life. No one should have to go through this." So on International Women's Day, she said, please don't harass women. And so what do you think happened as a result of that? She got harassed a ton. Almost instantly, a number of very high profile accounts started tweeting nonstop about how pathetic she was. And what do you know? That led to their followers harassing her. But perhaps the single worst instance of this was Tucker Carlson, a guy who has literally millions of daily viewers.
I like how Tucker is living in their heads rent-free. By the way, there was another negative response towards Taylor Lorenz. The video is titled, "New York Times star reporter cries harassment for pointing out her many mistakes."
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. We got a bunch of panelists, Rachel Bovard, Jennifer Holt. But first, Tiger, what are you looking at?
Well, I am taking a look at the New York Times' Taylor Lorenz. She somehow is involved and made the way. The story is all about her all over again, something that she just can't resist. This time she tweeted on International Women's Day that actually it should be about her and other victims of online harassment. Now, look, actual harassment is terrible, especially in real world contexts, in many cases online as well. But what she really meant is that people who are mean to her online or point out her many journalistic mistakes and insane stories that she's done over the years. So that was called out by Fox News' Tucker Carlson about her International Women's Day plea to please make it about women like herself who are reporters online and who have made a career out of punching down. The Times puts out a statement, incredibly. Let's put this up there on the screen. In a now familiar move, Tucker Carlson opened his show last night by attacking a journalist. It was calculated and a cruel tactic. And Crystal, their defense for why it was a calculated and cruel tactic is not a joke, is that Tucker said her full name 3 times, I believe, on the air. What is he supposed to do? Call her Taylor from the New York Times? Whenever you talk about somebody, you talk about their full name. This is the truth. They want zero accountability. And just to go over who Taylor Lorenz is, this is the person who falsely accused Mark Andreessen of using the R word on Clubhouse and then didn't apologize for 48 hours only after social media basically came after her and she locked her account. This is a person who went after Mr. Beast. Yes, Mr. Beast of YouTube, for saying a bad word when he was 19 years old, or the Instagram girl with no job account, because her mom was a prominent anti-Muslim activist. Not her mom. And so, you know what? I have zero sympathy, which is that this is a person who's built her entire career out of hall monitor journalism. She's the one who wrote Unfettered Conversations, by the way, who has made it a career in order to try and destroy people who are beneath her and use her platform, and just can't take it whenever people rightfully criticize her journalism. And just the sheer narcissism to compare like online harassment to actual treatment of the press. This is something friend of the show Glenn Greenwald pointed out. Let's put this up on the screen. Criticizing public figures, including influential journalists, is not harassment as abuse. This is coming from a man who has armed security guards and who the Brazilian government literally wants to throw in jail. Whenever she has experienced anything even close to that, then we can talk about journalist harassment. This is not even within the realm of all of this. And it just shows you the narcissism of the people who are at the very top of our elite media institute.
This sums up the mess that Taylor Lorenz made well, proving Tucker's point that she was making herself the center of attention, but it ended up making him the center of attention, so there isn't a clear answer. This only makes Lorenz look worse, which leads us onto the legal problems with what the New York Times had done. Let's say hypothetically Murray Carpenter, the journalist who doxed Tucker Carlson, lived in New York. Also, Fox News is located in New York. So this will be easy to figure out the laws on this issue. According to the law offices of Julie Rendleman, doxing is a slang term short for dropping documents. is the practice of posting someone's personal information online, sometimes in a public forum without the person's consent, often with the intent to make the person a target in the real world offline. Often you should assume that you will be arrested if you are found to be linked to a doxing event. It does vary by jurisdiction and circumstance, but the act of searching for someone's information itself can be illegal from the get-go, depending on which sites and methods are used. Information is obtained illegally if it's received from a hacking website or buying it from a database of information passed around on the dark web. One could also reasonably assume that any in-person harassment or assault as a result of doxing an individual could lead to any number of charges like assault, stalking, or battery, depending on the circumstances. Take into consideration that the information on this website is for general information purposes only. Nothing on this site should be taken as legal advice for any individual case or situation. This information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship, and receipt or viewing does not constitute such relationship. I cannot specifically find any laws for the doxing of the residential address of someone for New York, but I can try to clear the muddy water around the issue. Up Counsel says that one of the most effective ways to punish the corporation for corporate crime is by assessing a monetary fine and making the corporation pay restitution to the victims. The corporate agent, however, might face prison time for the crimes, so Murray Carpenter might be sent to prison or fined if the law bothered to work. Note that I'm not an expert on law. Now on to the final part before the conclusion. Now to rub it in your face that the Young Turks favour her. On the 10th of July 2020, Taylor Lorenz did an interview with former Young Turks employee Hassan Piker, the guy who says tax the rich even though he's rich.
Okay, Taylor Lorenz of the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen. She is a style reporter, right? Tech and style.
Yeah.
Welcome to Twitch. This is the other Zoomer intensive platform. I wanted to merge the two worlds right now and educate my audience and the Zoomers in here about what's going on in TikTok.
This is funny because the New York Times said she reported on Essential News. Also, I can't forget about the video titled Content Cop Taylor Lorenz, the most popular video covering her, which analysed her articles. It can be concluded that Taylor Lorenz is a manipulated person, from the way she has to play the victim and be the centre of attention in nearly every situation. For example, when she complained on Twitter, causing backlash from Fox News, the response from Fox News had a large domino effect on other media companies coming to defend her, because the New York Times has connections with many of these companies. Taylor Lorenz also likes to manipulate narratives when it comes to situations. For example, when she slandered Mark Andreessen and accused him of saying the R slur, which he clearly never said it. Another great example is when she was sued for defamation from Ariadna Jacob, because Taylor completely destroyed her reputation with the power that she wields working at the New York Times. One thing Lorenz is good at doing is slandering anyone who does not agree with her views. During the situation with Mark Andreessen, she watched and followed every move they made so she could put any dirt on them she wanted. Glenn Greenwald said that Lorenz herself has been obsessed with monitoring the Clubhouse discussions in general, and Andreessen in particular, for months. mocking him just last week when she obtained a fake credential to enter. Lorenz basically slanders anyone, and when she gets backlash, she plays the victim, making herself the center of attention, which provoked Tucker Carlson from Fox News to address what she said, causing a domino effect of media companies that have connections with the New York Times to lose their minds. Taylor Lorenz is untouchable in her position, with media companies such as the Young Turks rushing to her aid when Fox News points out her wrongdoings. The New York Times specifically likes to defend whenever she gets backlash, specifically from Fox News. A massive example is when they doxed Tucker Carlson and he responded and they played the victim, then attempted to do it again and received more backlash and still continued to play the victim, which was appalling and illegal. The Washington Post joined in to defend the New York Times for making this decision, but all they did was slander Tucker Carlson after the first doxing. Antifa tried attacking Tucker Carlson to try and silence him. The New York Times acts as a shield for Lorenz, getting other media companies to come to her aid, so she is able to write these slanderous hit pieces, which brings us onto a whole new conclusion. We can finally conclude that the New York Times breeds this behaviour. For example, the doxing of Tucker Carlson twice. The first time they hired Murray Carpenter to take photographs of the home. After the first doxing, Tucker Carlson was forced to move out of his home from Antifa terrorising them. When Tucker responded on Fox News, Murray got backlash for it and ended up playing the victim, which is a common thing among these journalists. The second time the New York Times did not succeed, as stated before, is completely illegal. Now, using connections with other media companies to bend the truth in their perspective is a nice way to destroy your credibility as a media company. Therefore, the New York Times is completely reckless and fails to report on essential news, and I have a feeling there are darker secrets at the New York Times than this. I'm your host, Immortal, and thanks for watching.